The tragic farewell. Yu Menglong's death and his mother's heartbreaking confession. The entertainment world stood still when the news broke. Yu Menglong, the beloved actor and singer known for his gentle smile, soulful eyes, and unforgettable performances, was gone. His death shocked millions across Asia and beyond, leaving fans in disbelief. But what followed was even more heart-shattering. In her grief, Yu Menglong's mother opened up about the battles her son had fought in silence, revealing why she had never wanted him to be part of the entertainment industry. Her words peeled back the glittering curtain of fame to expose a reality so dark it shook the very foundation of an industry built on beauty, dreams, and applause. Yu Menglong, affectionately called Alan Yu, rose to fame after his breakout role in the 2016 web drama Go Princess Go. His journey from a quiet young man with a love for music to a household name seemed like the kind of dream every aspiring artist chases. But on the day the world learned of his passing, fans could not believe the news. Online platforms crashed under the flood of tributes. Candle emojis, black and white photos, and tearful videos flooded social media. Hashtags like hashtag Remember Yu Menglong and hashtag Gone Too Soon trended worldwide. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there was a silence louder than grief. His mother had not spoken until 3 days later, when she appeared before cameras with trembling lips and red-rimmed eyes. What she said broke hearts and ignited conversations that refused to fade. "I never wanted him to enter this world," she said, her voice cracking. "I begged him to choose another path. He was pure, innocent, too trusting. I knew what the industry could do to someone like him, but he wanted to follow his dream, and I couldn't stop him." She paused, holding a framed photo of her son. The reporters stayed silent, sensing the weight of what was coming. Then came her revelation. Yu Menglong had confided in her about the harassment and exploitation he faced behind the scenes. He had experienced moments where his talent was overlooked, where his worth was reduced to appearances, and where silence was demanded in the face of misconduct. "He told me once," she continued, her tears spilling, "Mom, sometimes I feel like my body is not my own. Sometimes I feel like my voice is taken from me. Do you know what it means to hear that from your child? Do you know what it means to watch him smile in front of cameras, while behind closed doors he cried to me about things no one should ever endure?" The room was filled with sobs, not just from her, but from journalists and staff present. Her words painted a disturbing picture of an industry many admire, but few truly understand. The glitz and glamour of red carpets often hide the struggles artists endure: exhaustion, pressure, bullying, and in the worst cases, exploitation. Yu Menglong's mother described how he had once come home after filming, locking himself in his room for hours. When she knocked, he finally opened the door and whispered, "They want more than just my talent, Mom. They want my soul." That night, she said, he wept until he fell asleep in her lap, his dreams turning into chains he could not escape. Why didn't he speak out? Why didn't he fight back? His mother's answer was painfully simple: because the price of truth in this industry is too high. Yu Menglong, like many actors, feared that exposing the injustices he faced would mean the end of his career. Every role he worked for, every song he sang, every fan who adored him, he risked losing it all if he spoke. He told me, "Mom, if I say something, they will destroy me. They will make me disappear in a different way. I'll lose everything I've worked for." So he stayed quiet. He carried it all inside, and it crushed him. The silence wasn't just his choice. It was a burden forced upon him, a cruel demand from an industry that profits from compliance and punishes defiance. From the beginning, Yu Menglong's mother opposed his dream, not because she didn't believe in him, but because she knew the shadows that lurked behind the stage lights. She had seen other young stars crumble, heard whispers of powerful figures who used their influence to exploit the vulnerable, and watched as careers were destroyed overnight when someone dared to resist. I told him, "Son, there are wolves hiding in that world. They smile, but they will eat you alive." He laughed and said, "Mom, I'll be careful. I'll protect myself." But how could he? He was too kind, too gentle, and this world is not kind to gentle souls. Her regret echoed in every word. She had hoped he would choose stability, a quiet life away from the cameras. But his passion was unstoppable, and like many mothers, she stepped aside, praying her fears were wrong. Tragically, they were not. The public's response was overwhelming. Vigils were held in cities across China, South Korea, and beyond. Fans lit candles, sang his songs in trembling voices, and held posters with messages like, "Rest in peace, Alan," and "We will never forget your smile." But alongside the grief was a growing anger. Fans began demanding accountability, questioning the industry's silence, and calling for protection for young stars. Online, movements began trending with hashtags such as hashtag protect the artists, hashtag justice for Yu Menglong, and hashtag end industry abuse. His death was no longer just a personal tragedy. It was becoming a turning point in public discourse. Yu Menglong's story now represents something larger. He is no longer just a boy with a guitar who sang about love, or the actor who made audiences swoon with his roles. He has become a symbol of the innocence that is too often exploited in the name of fame. His mother's testimony highlighted what many have whispered for years, but few dare to say aloud, that behind the carefully curated image of the entertainment world lies an environment where power often outweighs morality, and where silence is demanded more than truth. Though gone, Yu Menglong leaves behind a legacy of love, talent, and now, change. His mother has vowed that her son's suffering will not be forgotten. She has spoken openly about starting a foundation in his name, one that would provide counseling, legal support, and protection for young talents in the entertainment industry. "I couldn't protect my son," she wept, "but maybe I can protect someone else's child. If one life is saved because of him, then he did not die in vain." Fans have rallied behind her cause, pledging donations and volunteering to raise awareness. What began as mourning is slowly transforming into a movement, one Yu Menglong himself would likely have supported with his quiet but determined spirit. The day of his funeral was draped in white lilies, his favorite flower. Friends, colleagues, and fans lined the streets as his coffin was carried. Some collapsed in tears, others stood in stunned silence. His mother clutched a photo of him that had become her shield, whispering through sobs, "You deserved a better world, my son. You deserve peace." As the ceremony ended, his fans sang one of his most beloved songs. Their voices cracked, but together they rose into the sky, carrying his memory like a prayer. And in that moment, the world understood what his mother had meant all along, that Yu Menglong had given everything of himself to his dream, and in return it had taken too much. Yu Menglong's passing and his mother's confessions should not fade into memory. They must ignite a fire that refuses to go out. The entertainment industry must answer the questions his death raised. The grief surrounding Yu Menglong's passing refused to settle into silence. In the days that followed his funeral, a storm of emotions swept across fans, friends, and colleagues who had once stood beside him on red carpets and in rehearsal halls. Each new memory, each confession, each trembling story brought the world closer to reality he had tried so hard to hide. What had seemed like the life of a rising star was, behind closed doors, a battlefield of loneliness, pressure, and silence that his gentle heart could no longer endure. His mother's revelation about the harassment he endured did not disappear into the noise of headlines. Instead, it spread like fire, raw, uncontrollable, and unstoppable. People who had admired him from afar suddenly felt as if they had failed him, as though their cheers and applause had drowned out his quiet cries for help. And his mother, still holding the framed photo of her son as though it were the only thread keeping her alive, repeated the words that would forever haunt the industry. "I never wanted him to be in this position." Those words echoed in every corner of the entertainment world. On fan forums, people dissected her statements, some in tears, some in anger, some refusing to believe such darkness could exist in an industry that sells beauty and dreams. Yet others, particularly those who had once walked the same path as Yu Menglong, admitted that his mother's testimony was not a surprise. Behind the glamour, they said, the shadows have always been there, preying on the vulnerable, silencing the brave. One former co-star, who spoke anonymously, shared a painful memory that only deepened the ache. "We were filming late into the night," the actor recalled. He looked exhausted, but he kept smiling because the crew was tired too. During a break, I asked him if he was okay. He said, "I'm fine." But later, I saw him sitting alone behind the set, shaking, holding his head in his hands. I wanted to comfort him, but he quickly wiped his face and smiled again as if nothing happened. That's how he was, always hiding his pain. His colleagues described him as someone who carried everyone else's burdens but spoke little of his own. He was the first to arrive on set, the last to leave. He was unfailingly polite, gentle to even the coldest staff, and always willing to give more than what was asked. But behind those gestures was a man who seemed increasingly distant, as though the world around had grown too heavy to bear. For his fans, the hardest truth was realizing how much he had suffered in silence while they celebrated his every move. They replayed his interviews, searching for signs they had missed. The flicker of sadness in his eyes, the forced laughter, the way he sometimes paused before answering questions about his personal life. They realized his smile was not always joy, but sometimes a mask, carefully painted to protect both himself and those who loved him. His mother revealed one conversation that seemed to capture everything. One night, he came home after a long shoot. I could see he was exhausted, but there was something else in his eyes. Fear, maybe despair. He said to me, "Mom, do you ever feel like you don't own yourself anymore?" I asked what he meant, but he just shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter." He never told me more. But that night, I realized my son was living in a cage he could not escape. The world mourned not only the loss of his life, but also the loss of his innocence, the light he had once carried so effortlessly. Vigils grew larger, with fans bringing not just flowers but letters apologizing for not seeing his pain, letters promising to continue his fight, letters begging him to rest peacefully. Some read their words aloud at gatherings, their voices trembling but determined to let him know, wherever he was, that he was not alone anymore. Social media campaigns grew louder. Movements demanding accountability for the treatment of young artists reached government ears. Commentators, journalists, and advocates began debating what must change in the industry to prevent another tragedy. His name became a rallying cry, his death a spark that fueled conversations too long ignored. If he had to suffer for the truth to come out, one fan wrote, then let us make sure his suffering was not in vain. And yet, for all the noise, there was still silence. Silence in the empty chair at his family's dining table. Silence in the studio where his guitar now gathered dust. Silence in his mother's trembling hands as she touched the clothes he once wore. That silence was the heaviest of all, a reminder that behind every public tragedy lies a private grief too deep for words. In one particularly haunting scene, described by a family friend, his mother returned to his childhood bedroom after the funeral. She sat on his bed, surrounded by the posters and books he had collected before fame took him away. She opened a notebook he had left behind, filled with lyrics he never recorded. In the margins, in small handwriting, he had written, "Sometimes I feel like a song without melody." She wept until her tears stained the pages, clinging to the fragments of a soul that had been stolen too soon. This continuation of his story is not just about his pain. It is about the courage of his mother, who chose to speak when silence would have been easier. It is about the fans who refused to let his memory fade, and about the colleagues who are now re-examining their own choices, wondering if they too have been complicit in an industry that thrives on silence. Most of all, it is about a young man who loved music, who dreamed of sharing joy, and who wanted nothing more than to live authentically, but found himself trapped in a world that demanded his compliance instead of his truth. Yu Menglong's legacy now stretches beyond his roles, beyond his songs. It lies in the conversations he has sparked, the movements he has inspired, and the hope that his story will finally push the industry toward change. His mother's plea still rings in the ears of millions. I never want him to be in this position. And perhaps that plea will finally be heard. For now, the world holds on to memory of his gentle smile, his soft laughter, and his talent that once seemed limitless. They hold on to hope that somewhere, beyond the pain, he has found the peace that eluded him in life. And as candles continue to burn in his name, one truth remains unshaken. Yu Menglong may be gone, but his story is far from over.